Some people find out their parents don't respect them in subtle ways. A forgotten birthday card, a backhanded compliment, a quiet sigh when you mention your job. Me? I found out on a Tuesday morning when my dad forgot to hang up the phone. I was in my office, aka the spare bedroom that still smelled faintly of the carpet cleaner I'd used when I bought this place, answering emails and drinking stale coffee. My dad had called to ask if I could transfer money into their account again, just to tide them over. That was our dynamic. I worked, they spent, and no one talked about it. I said sure. Because I always said sure. Because I was that guy, reliable, accommodating, the designated family ATM with a pulse. But when I thought he'd hung up, I heard the rustling on the other end. Like he'd settled deeper into his recliner. Then, clear as day, came the sentence that snapped something in me I didn't know was still capable of breaking. "He's nothing," my dad said. "A failure. Should have never been born." I didn't move. A second voice, my mom, sighed in that disappointed way she'd perfected. "Well," she replied, "it's not like we'll be here forever. Once we've saved enough, we'll buy that place near Aaron." At least he turned out the way we'd hoped. Aaron. My older brother. The family's crowning achievement. The golden child who somehow became a legend in their minds, despite living in Phoenix and calling only when he needed something notarized. My stomach went cold. In that moment, I was a kid again, standing in the hallway with a participation trophy in my hand, watching my parents beam at Aaron's latest accomplishment, which, if I recall correctly, was getting a B+ in middle school P. I should have hung up. Should have thrown my phone across the room. Instead, I sat there, listening while they talked about how they'd put up with me for years because it was cheaper than paying rent. "That house is the only smart thing he's ever done," my dad said. "He thinks buying it made him successful. All it did was make him useful." I didn't even feel angry at first. Just tired. Tired of pretending their approval was possible. Tired of paying the mortgage on a home I was apparently only renting to them emotionally. Tired of believing that if I just worked harder, if I just gave more, they'd see me as something other than a regrettable accident. When they finally ended the call, I set the phone down on my desk. My hand was steady, which somehow made it worse. Like my heart had already decided to stop expecting anything better. In the silence that followed, I looked around my house, my nice, too big, meticulously furnished house, and wondered how I'd let it become a monument to people who thought I was worthless. And the part that stung most wasn't even what they'd said. It was that I believed them. Deep down, some stubborn little voice kept whispering that they were right. That no matter how many promotions I stacked up, no matter how many bills I covered, I'd never be enough to make them proud. I remembered the last Christmas we spent together. I'd splurged on a big gift, a smart TV, the kind my dad used to point at in the electronics store, saying, "Maybe one day." I'd saved for 6 months to buy it. When he unwrapped it, he looked almost embarrassed. He mumbled, "You shouldn't have wasted your money." Then he called Aaron on speaker, just so he could brag about the real surprise, a framed picture Aaron had mailed last minute with a post-it that said, "Love you guys." That was it. A picture and a note. And they were happier about that than the TV. Than me. So no, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, finally understanding that I'd never been anything more than a convenient wallet with my name on the deed. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to relief. Because once you hear the worst thing someone thinks about you, there's no point pretending you don't already know. The funny thing about betrayal is how ordinary the rest of your day still looks. After I heard them say I was nothing, I still had to finish 3 project proposals, answer 6 emails about budget approvals, and pretend my life hadn't just been cracked open. By 5 p.m., I'd successfully convinced my colleagues I was fine. That's the gift of being the disappointment. You learn early how to wear a blank face. That evening, my parents came home like nothing had happened. My dad dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, and my mom asked if I'd remembered to pick up their favorite yogurt. She said it like she was testing me, like I might screw up even that. I nodded. Wordless. They went straight to the kitchen, rummaging through the bags I'd paid for, in the house I bought, under the roof I kept over their heads. And they didn't thank me? They never did. Later, when my dad turned on the new smart TV, yes, the one I shouldn't have wasted my money on, he looked up and asked if I was in a mood. No, I said. I'm good. And it was almost true. Because something had shifted. I could feel it like a hairline fracture finally splitting open. I stopped caring what they thought. For years, I'd let them treat my accomplishments like footnotes, and my generosity like an obligation. I told myself it was easier that way, to keep the peace, to avoid the guilt. But the moment they called me a failure behind my back, I knew I was done performing. I lay awake that night replaying every petty dismissal, every time they'd compared me to Aaron like he was some paragon of human potential. How Aaron was always the measuring stick. How my parents acted like the 3 business degrees I'd earned were less impressive than the time Aaron managed to get a $500 bonus for selling the most car warranties. It was absurd. All of it. The next morning, I made breakfast, eggs and toast, and set it on the counter like always. They didn't thank me for that either. When my dad sat down, he started in on his usual complaints about the house. How the HOA was too strict. How the property taxes were ridiculous. How can you stand it? He asked, waving a piece of toast like it was evidence. Wasting your money on all this. I looked at him, at the man who'd just called me worthless less than 24 hours ago, and I realized he didn't even feel bad. Of course he didn't. People who treat you like an ATM rarely feel guilty when they overdraw. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to scream or throw their things onto the lawn in some big soap opera finale. I was going to be smarter. Quieter. I was going to leave them exactly the way they'd left me, without warning. Later that day, I called my financial advisor. Hey, Nathan, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Quick question, how fast could I sell this place? Nathan paused. Depends how motivated you are. Extremely, I said. After we hung up, I called a realtor. Then a lawyer. By sunset, I had a plan. And as I sat on my deck with a beer in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. I used to think big life changes happened with fanfare, fireworks, tears, someone shouting on the porch in their bathrobe. Turns out, the real ones start quietly. By the following Monday, I had a listing contract signed and a timeline mapped out down to the last day. It was almost embarrassing how easy it was to unravel a life I'd spent 15 years trying to hold together. The realtor, a brisk woman named Denise with an energy like a motivational speaker on her 5th espresso, walked me through the comps. You've got an immaculate place, she said, tapping her iPad. We can price it to move fast and still get top dollar. Do it, I told her. She gave me a curious look. You sure you want to leave this much behind? I almost laughed. Leave what behind exactly? A house that felt like a mausoleum of my failed attempts to matter? Parents who would sell me out for a weekend in Phoenix with Aaron? Yes, I said. I'm sure. The next call was to my lawyer, Tim. Tim had the unflappable tone of a man who'd seen every kind of family meltdown. He didn't ask why I wanted to confirm the deed was solely in my name. He just pulled up the records and emailed me the confirmation with a single line. You're good to go. That was it. 17 years of financial entanglement, all distilled to a PDF that proved I owned every square inch of the place. When I hung up, I felt lighter. I spent that afternoon filling boxes. There was something almost meditative about it, sorting my life into piles of mine trash. And why did I ever keep this? I found an old shoebox of Aaron's trophies shoved into a corner of the garage, every single one labeled first place. Of course. I taped it shut without a second thought. Let them mail them to Phoenix. Maybe Aaron could build a shrine. After the realtor set the listing live, I scheduled an interview in Denver. Denver had been a daydream for years, a place where nobody knew me as the disappointing son, where my last name didn't feel like a brand I hadn't asked for. When the recruiter confirmed my appointment, I felt something sharp in my chest. Not dread, hope. By Wednesday, the first offers were coming in. Denise texted me excitedly. 2 serious buyers. 1 all cash. I smiled, picturing my parents in the kitchen, oblivious. Because they were still in the same routine. My dad reading the paper and muttering about kids these days. My mom fussing over coupons she never used. Not a clue that I was about to disappear from their lives the way they disappeared from mine in every way but physical presence. That evening, as I packed another box, my dad yelled from the living room. "You're not making dinner?" "No," I called back. "Not tonight." He grumbled something under his breath. Probably about how ungrateful I was. I didn't care. I was finally ungrateful. And it felt fantastic. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, looking around at all the little things I used to think would make them love me, the fancy appliances, the coordinated curtains, the framed family photos. A museum of attempts. I took the photos down. Packed them last, almost as an afterthought. One of them slipped out of the frame, me and Aaron, ages 9 and 12, sitting on Santa's lap. Aaron smiling like he owned the North Pole. Me looking like I'd just been informed I was on the naughty list forever. I put it in the trash pile without hesitation. Because I was done trying to earn space in someone else's narrative. I was finally writing my own. I expected the day the for sale sign went up to feel dramatic, like a reality show moment with ominous music and a camera zooming in on my parents' shocked faces. Instead, it was anticlimactic. Denise pulled up in her shiny SUV, popped the trunk, and hauled out the sign like she was delivering a pizza. "You sure you don't want to tell them first?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "They'll figure it out," I said. And they did. About 20 minutes after Denise left, my dad stepped onto the porch in his bathrobe and cheap drugstore slippers. He stared at the sign like it had personally insulted him. "Hey!" he shouted through the screen door. "What the hell is this?" I didn't bother walking over. "It's called a real estate sign," I said from the hallway. "You might have seen one before." He looked like he was about to burst a blood vessel. My mom came to stand beside him, her expression somewhere between bewildered and offended. "You're selling the house?" she demanded. "Without even talking to us?" I met her eyes, and for once, I didn't look away. "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." My dad threw his hands up. "This is ridiculous. Where are we supposed to go?" I shrugged. "Phoenix? Near Aaron? You know, the real success story?" Her face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might try to deny it. Pretend she hadn't sat there in my kitchen plotting to leave the second they drained me dry. But she didn't. She just closed her mouth and looked away. I spent the next few days packing at double speed. Every time I filled another box, it felt like reclaiming a little piece of my sanity. I cleared out the spare bedroom first, aka my dad's unofficial lair, where he'd spent hours criticizing my generation, while simultaneously using my Netflix account. I found a pile of unpaid bills he'd never mentioned, hidden under the TV remote. Electric, water, credit cards. All in my name, naturally. I stacked them on the kitchen table in a neat pile and left a bright yellow post-it on top that said, "This is what happens when nothing pays your bills." Petty? Maybe. But satisfying? Absolutely. The last night before the house was scheduled to close, I ordered takeout and sat in the empty living room. My dad stomped around the kitchen, slamming cabinet doors for effect. "You're acting like a child," he yelled. I didn't even look up from my noodles. "That's rich," I called back. "Considering you spent all day sulking because your free ride is over." My mom sniffed dramatically. "After everything we've done for you," she began. I laughed, actually laughed. The kind of laugh that sounds unhinged because it's holding back everything you'd rather scream. "You mean the endless criticism? The constant comparisons to Aaron? The part where you told your friend I was a waste of oxygen?" Silence. I set down my fork and finally looked them both in the eye. "You've got 30 days, I said calmly. "Then you find somewhere else to live." My dad opened his mouth. Probably to call me ungrateful. Or selfish. But I didn't stick around to hear it. I picked up my takeout, walked upstairs, and closed the door. Because this was my house. And for once, I was the one deciding who belonged in it. The next morning, the kitchen was quiet. I think the reality finally sank in that I wasn't bluffing. No more gentle hints. No more pretending we were all just working through things. The sign out front said it all: sold. They hadn't even asked where I was going. They were too busy calculating how to spin this to the rest of the family. Around noon, my mom tried a new tactic: softness. She appeared in the doorway while I was taping up boxes of my old work files, twisting a dish towel in her hands like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "Sweetheart," she began, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "We know you've been under a lot of stress." I didn't look up. "Don't," I said. "Don't what?" "Don't pretend this is about my stress." She stepped into the room. "Your father didn't mean what he said." "Yeah, he did," I cut in. "And so did you." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I taped the box shut, feeling strangely calm. "You've got a month," I said again, because repetition seemed to be the only language they understood. She started to cry. The tears were real, maybe. But they weren't for me. They were for the comfort they were losing. That afternoon, Aaron called. Of course he did. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He launched into it without preamble. "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" "Hi, Aaron. Nice to hear from you, too." "Mom's a mess," he snapped. "Dad says you're kicking them out? Are you trying to destroy this family?" I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Funny," I said. "I thought you were the golden child. Maybe you can step up for once." He went quiet. "You know," I continued, "it's amazing. You don't call for 6 months, but the second your free babysitting and mortgage subsidies are threatened, you suddenly care." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "No," I said. "It's accurate." He sighed, probably imagining how inconvenient it would be to have our parents living with him. "I'll send them some money," he muttered. "But you don't have to be so dramatic." "Selling my own house isn't dramatic," I said. "It's overdue." I hung up before he could say anything else. And for the first time since I was 15, I felt taller somehow. The last week before closing was a master class in guilt trips. My dad alternated between ignoring me completely and delivering half-hour monologues about family loyalty. My mom tried every angle, pleading, crying, accusing. "You're going to regret this," she hissed one morning when I carried a box to my car. "When you're old and alone." I set the box down and turned to face her. "I already regret staying this long," I said quietly. "And if being alone is the price of peace, I'll pay it." She looked stunned, like the idea that I'd rather be by myself than under their thumb had never occurred to her. That night, I booked a moving truck and a short-term rental in Denver. Just a furnished apartment for a couple months while I figured out where I really wanted to land. And for the first time in a decade, my future felt like mine. Not a contingency plan for anyone else. The last Saturday before closing, Denise texted me to confirm the final walkthrough. "Buyers are thrilled," she wrote. "Smoothest deal I've had all year." I wondered if she realized she was describing the most liberating breakup of my life. I spent that morning making a list. Everything I'd paid for in this house, in their lives, every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every grocery run they never reimbursed. And the extras. Like the loan I'd quietly paid off when my dad maxed out a credit card, helping Aaron get on his feet. Or the $1,000 check I slipped into my mom's purse after she cried about how she couldn't buy Christmas gifts for the grandkids. I put it all in a spreadsheet. Column after column of proof that I'd been holding this family together with my wallet. Then I printed it out. 17 pages. I placed the stack on the kitchen table. When my parents came downstairs, my dad glanced at it and snorted. "What's this supposed to be?" "A receipt," I said. "For what?" "For everything," I said, meeting his eyes. "Since you seem to think I've contributed nothing." My mom picked up the first page. Her mouth moved silently as she scanned the rows. "You're keeping score now?" she demanded, voice rising. No, I said. I already won. She threw the papers down like they'd burned her. I don't care what you've paid for, she snapped. You're still our son. You owe us respect. That's not what you said on the phone, I replied, voice steady. Remember? He's nothing. A failure. Her eyes widened, and she glanced at my dad. For once, he didn't have a quick retort ready. I continued because I knew if I didn't say it now, I never would. You know what the saddest part is? I'd have kept going. I'd have kept paying your bills and pretending this was a real family if you just lied to my face instead of to each other. My dad's jaw flexed. You're a disappointment, he spat. There it was. The Greatest Hits, remastered. I nodded. That's fine, I said. Because I'm done auditioning. He stood there, fist clenched, like he was deciding whether to shout or just walk away. He chose neither. Instead, he turned and went out the back door, letting it slam so hard the cabinet rattled. My mom stayed frozen in place. I don't understand how you can do this to us, she whispered. I picked up the last box of my things. You taught me, I said. And I walked out. That final hour in the house felt oddly weightless. I half expected to be sad, or to look back over my shoulder. But I didn't. I just locked the front door behind me and set the keys in the realtor's Dropbox like I was returning a library book I'd outgrown. When I climbed into my car, the last of the afternoon sun was filtering through the windshield. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing. Then I drove. I didn't blast music. I didn't call anyone to announce my escape. I just let the highway unfold, mile after mile. I passed through dusty little towns and empty stretches of road. Somewhere around the state line, I pulled off at a gas station and bought a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. I didn't care. Even stale bread felt like a better meal than any dinner I'd shared under that roof. By the time I crossed into Colorado, my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls. My mom, my dad, and one unknown number I could only assume was Aaron. I turned it off. Because finally, for the first time in my adult life, their voices didn't matter more than mine. And I realized I wasn't running away. I was moving towards something better. Denver felt like a blank page. The day I pulled into town, my whole life fit in the back of my SUV, 3 suitcases, a box of kitchen stuff, my laptop, and a few framed prints I'd picked up over the years, pictures I'd never bothered to hang in the old house because it never felt like it belonged to me. I signed the lease on my little furnished apartment. It wasn't fancy, just a 1-bedroom with beige walls and squeaky floors, but when I walked in, I felt like I could finally exhale. No one's expectations clung to the corners. No voices critiquing my choices. No undercurrent of disappointment humming behind every conversation. Just quiet. The first night, I ate takeout on the floor and watched the sunset spill over the skyline. It felt like something was settling inside me, something that had been rattling around for decades, searching for a place to land. Freedom. On my second day, I started my new job. The office was smaller, scrappier than the corporate monolith I'd left behind. But the people were normal. No one knew my last name. No one cared about my potential, or my failures. They just wanted to know if I could do the work. And for the first time, that was enough. By Friday, I'd learned all my coworkers' names and found a corner coffee shop where the barista didn't look bored when I ordered black coffee. I set up my desk, just a laptop and a small plant I bought on impulse. A little green symbol that I wasn't planning to leave again. I'd been in Denver about a week when the letters started coming. The first was a long, rambling note from my mom. "We don't understand how you could abandon us this way," she wrote. "Family means everything. We were counting on you." She didn't mention the phone call. Didn't apologize. Didn't even pretend to acknowledge how deeply they'd hurt me. Just accusation. 2 days later, a postcard arrived, Aaron's handwriting. "You need to call Mom. She's not sleeping. She's worried sick." I tossed it in the trash without reading the rest. Because I knew what it would say. That I was selfish. Ungrateful. Dramatic. I'd heard it all before. The third letter was the hardest to ignore. My dad in stiff, blocky penmanship. We may have said things we didn't mean. But you're still our son. We're getting older. You'll regret this when we're gone. For a moment, I almost folded. Almost called. Almost slipped back into the old habit of trying to be the better man, the more forgiving one. But then I remembered every night I'd lain awake, wondering what was wrong with me that no amount of sacrifice ever felt like enough. I remembered the phone call. The words, "He's nothing. A failure." And I realized they weren't sorry for what they'd said. They were sorry they'd lost the benefits of having me around. I put the letters in a shoebox and shoved it to the back of the closet. Maybe someday I'd look at them again. Maybe not. That Saturday, I went for a long walk through the neighborhood. Rows of tidy brick buildings, kids riding scooters, couples arguing about takeout. Nobody knew me. Nobody cared about my family drama. It was perfect. That night I wrote back. A short letter. No bitterness. No accusations. Just the truth. I will stay in touch if you can respect my boundaries. But I will never again be your financial safety net. I'm building a life that belongs to me. I hope you find peace. I mailed it without a return address. Because I didn't need them to know where I was. And when I dropped it in the mailbox, I felt something finally click into place. This was closure. Not the tidy, forgiving kind. But the kind that meant I didn't have to keep carrying their disappointment as my burden. And I slept that night like I hadn't slept in years. 3 weeks passed without a word. I thought maybe they'd taken the hint. Then, on a Monday morning, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. For a second, my stomach lurched, some old reflex, expecting disaster. But I let it ring. No voicemail. 10 minutes later, another call. Then a text. Your father is in the hospital. He's asking for you. For a moment, my mind split. The old me, trained to drop everything, to race home and rescue the people who'd never shown up for me, wanted to throw clothes in a bag and drive all night. But then I pictured the shoebox of bills. The spreadsheet. The kitchen table, where my dad had called me a disappointment even as he lived off my kindness. And I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself yet. I didn't owe them a single thing. That afternoon, I went to work like normal. Answered emails. Ate lunch at my desk. Listened to my coworker tell a story about her dog. Nobody asked why I looked tired. Nobody expected me to explain. After work, I stopped by the grocery store. Bought pasta and a cheap bottle of wine. I cooked in my tiny kitchen with the windows open, Denver's evening air drifting through the screens. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. My mom's voice, brittle and weary. If you don't come now, you'll regret it. We're still your parents. I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I powered off the phone. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about choosing yourself, it feels selfish and holy at the same time. I ate dinner slowly. Watched a stupid sitcom on my laptop. Washed the dishes. And then I sat in the dark living room, letting the quiet settle in my bones. I didn't feel relief, exactly. Or triumph. I felt steady. For the first time in my life, there was no performance. No script I had to follow to be deemed acceptable. Just me. A few nights later, I went out with my new coworkers for drinks. Someone made a toast, nothing special, just a casual. Cheers to the team. But as everyone clinked glasses, I caught my reflection in the bar mirror. I looked tired, sure. A little older. But I also looked like someone who'd finally stopped trying to earn a place he'd never been welcome. When I got home, I took the last of the letters from my parents out of the shoebox. I didn't read them again. I put them through the shredder, one by one. And when the last slip of paper disappeared, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. Not all at once. Not with fanfare. But in the small, steady way that real endings arrive. The next morning, I woke up early. Went for a walk before sunrise. The city was still asleep. The air smelled like rain. I stood at the corner of my street and watched the sky turn from black to gray to gold. And I thought, this is it. This is mine. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them. I don't know if they'll ever understand why I left. But for the first time, I'm not waiting for their permission to feel whole. And if that makes me a disappointment, so be it. I'd rather be a disappointment on my own terms than a success on theirs.